This is Jason with Seller Fuel, and for this week's episode on Seller Fuel Live, we'll be discussing about cash flow. And let's face it, whether or not you are starting, growing, or scaling your businesses, cash flow is and will be always the most critical factor of your business. And now we are at the final stretch of 2022. Having enough cash flow to sustain our business growth is critical. And today we have a very special guest with Jack from Payabilities, and we'll be sitting down and discussing everything about cash flows and your options to make sure you can end this year strong on a really high note. So I'll bring Jack here on today's interview, and we'll get started. So
Hey, what's going on, Jason? How's everyone in Solar Fuel Nation going?
hey, thank you for joining us on the live podcast. And I think you have a lot of very interesting insight to share with our audience today. And can you just first start off with introducing yourself and tell us a little bit more about payabilities?
Yeah, and Jason, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be a part of one, your podcast, and two, what you're building over at Seller Fuel. For a little bit of background, I'm the head of strategic partnerships at Payability. Payability is a working capital provider to Amazon, Walmart, Newegg, and Shopify businesses. Where we really what we really focus on is solving for Amazon and Walmart businesses that might be facing cash flow issues as a result of not getting paid out on the sales that they are making for several weeks at a time. We currently work with roughly 2,500 sellers, US based sellers, as well as folks in the UK and Canada, and are in the process of growing internationally. So, again, pleasure to be here and look forward to meeting with some of you all.
Yeah, thank you for being on. And I think this is a timely subject because usually, well, majority of the business, of course, it depends on what you sell and what kind of seasons that you are in. But Q4 is usually the peak season for a lot of the e-commerce brand that's out there, and it could lead to the perfect segue on what is cash flow and how can you say that your business have has a healthy cash flow.
Yeah, so Jason, that's a great question. Simply put, cash flow is the net balance of cash coming in and or out of the business. For Amazon sellers, though, achieving a positive cash flow, which is having more money coming into the business than out, as opposed to negative cash flow, which is more business cash going out than in, it could be a lot more challenging. And again, this ties into the 2 week and in some cases 20-day holds that Amazon and Walmart put to pay their sellers. So you could say that your business has a healthy cash flow, really when you're able to consistently have the cash on hand on a daily basis to reinvest it into effective channels for your business. Now, an effective channel can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different businesses and a lot of different people. But for the sake of Amazon and Walmart sellers, that could be rolling out a new SKU and placing an order at bulk at a discount for new inventory. That could be restocking on inventory in general and ensuring you have the capital on hand to receive inventory ahead of schedule to not run into the potential for stockouts. And then, we have to keep this inventory turning, right? So deploying more of that capital towards effective marketing channels.
Yeah, and this is something I also have, well, a love and hate relationship with my own e-commerce brand. I remember when the business is scaling, when I first ordered my first 40-foot container, it was like 10 or 20 grand deposit just for like all the inventory. So it was a lot of it could be a very stressful moment for the business owner to put in that much amount of cash into inventory, and hopefully that's not going to be another like total supply chain meltdown that we have experienced in the past couple of years with COVID, where all your cash that got invested into the inventory now got stuck on the water. And it actually happened to one of our container I think it was 2 years ago, right in the middle of the pandemic. We have a 40-foot container that got stuck right outside of LA port for like 2 months. So that was not a good situation with all the money just sitting there outside of the port. So,
No, it's not a great feeling, Jason. And listen, sellers are facing all sorts of, you hit on the supply chain issues, right? That was causing this huge lag, an extended lag of receiving shipments of inventory, and you essentially were a sitting duck and almost hopeless,
yeah.
waiting for that inventory to come in. While on the other side of it, you might have had consistent buyers of the product, sitting there like, hey, when can I get, XYZ? I really, really love this. And, that could be a really suffocating feeling for a founder, an entrepreneur, thinking I might be losing, business, a customer, a recurring customer, all because of, these supply chain issues. But all sorts of macroeconomic, just struggles are currently facing our sellers. The inflation, the economy, unemployment, which also is a limiting factor to sellers being able to again just ensure that their inventory is arriving on time. But yeah, very interesting story and very real one that you just shared.
Yeah, and this is actually the perfect segue to the next question that we have is profit versus cash flow. Which one is more important?
Wow. This is very, very tough. Just again, simply put, with profit, and it can be defined a bunch of different ways, but I, like to define it as the balance that remains when all of a business's operating expenses are subtracted from its revenues. And again, the real difference here between profit and cash flow is that profit reflects the amount of money left over after all expenses have been paid, while cash flow indicates the net flow of cash into and out of a business at any given point of time. What's interesting, though, Jason, and this, is at the end of the day, though, you could have a negative cash flow and still be turning a profit, while at the same time you could very easily have positive cash flow and not be profitable. So it's tough in that aspect if you look at it that way. But if I had to really say, hey, one or the other, I would say for an Amazon seller, having that positive and consistent cash flow gives you so much more optionality. At the end of the day, when you're looking to scale and grow or just maintain and establish Amazon business, if you are not able to have that source of capital at hand to replenish inventory, to continue deploying capital towards working ad campaigns that everyone else is also competing towards, you're going to quickly see yourself in a potential rapid declining sales rate. Now, obviously, turning a profit is what everybody wants, but when I really think about it, it's the optionality of positive cash flow that gives you the opportunity to see the highest return on your investment.
Yeah, that's a good, very interesting aspect to look at it. The way I look at it is the worst thing that could happen to a business owner is when you don't have the cash to pay your team, like to pay your
Right.
payroll. That would be a really bad situation. And actually, I was in a similar situation 2 years ago during COVID because it have a huge impact on our brand because of COVID, and we do most of our customer base is from school, and as you know, all the school across the United States got shut down around the
Yeah.
same time. So it had a huge impact. And what I was facing before is because we don't have enough emergency cash in reserve to really like cushion that kind of like huge financial fluctuations. And I think right now there's also a lot of talk about a few potential recession that's going on in the U.S. economy, which is going to spill over to the global economy as well. So having at least some kind of cash in reserve that you can use for whatever the purposes. It could be the marketing that you mentioned about, or it could be used to grow the business, or just to sustain the payroll. I think is critical for the overall health of any business. So
yeah, and you bring up a really good point, Jason, too, is, we've been seeing this for the last, what, I mean, it feels like 2 years, but really over the last 6 months is when a lot of these e-commerce related businesses now, sellers, again, it varies in regards to how they've been doing and achieving. Some are, just growing and maintaining and constantly innovating to the point where, they're seeing all of this growth, albeit all of these macroeconomic pressures. But there have been a lot of these businesses, to your point, that, have been looking and just eyeing ways to cut costs in order to ensure that they have that runway that you mentioned down the road. And, let's face it, nobody likes, losing things like valuable employees. At some point, though, as you mentioned, you got to do everything you can to protect the people that are helping you build the business, your business. But, it's also important to figure out, if you are in a cash crunch and you don't have access to funds, how can you create more liquidity for yourself to ensure sustainability?
yeah, for sure. That's definitely very important. And my next question is, why cash flow is king, especially for the Amazon business. I think you touched it on a little bit of the question earlier, but do you have any things that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think, the real points to your point to really drive home is that, again, and it varies based on the businesses, but with Amazon businesses specifically, unless you have, again, some, very large line of credit, you have, friends and family that have poured in helpful investments, the potential the potential ability for sellers to essentially not have the capital on hand as to restock inventory if it's turning at a quick amount as a result of the delay in payout is something that is potentially very detrimental to if the business is going to survive, is Amazon locking up those funds. Now, outside of what I already mentioned, is, again, if you're at risk of going out of stock or not being able to purchase certain keywords or deploy capital towards ad campaigns and having to wait, this is something that is going to limit the ability for you to grow and scale your brand. Whereas, for a normal business that isn't, so reliant on this 2-week pay period or sales proceeds to reinvest back into the business, you might have a larger investment from friends and family, outside investors that allow for longer sustainability. But I think I really touched on that earlier.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the cash flow is also very important for e-commerce based or inventory based business, because
Yes.
without inventory, why are you selling? you have no, you have nothing that's generating revenue. The inventory and the product that we are selling is really the main revenue driver, but it can get into a negative spiral if your cash flow is out of control. Like, you're selling well, then you don't have the cash to sustain your inventory. Then you get into a stock out situations. And as we know, especially with Amazon algorithm, when you're stock out for over a long period of time, it's really, really hard to get back in the game, to be in the good spot as far as organic ranking, and also for like getting a momentum to build up your review for your Amazon listing. So everything can go into a very negative spiral pretty quick when you're out of stock, and it happened to our brand before as well, multiple times.
Exactly.
So it's definitely one of the very important issue, I think the inventory management and cash flow management actually go hands in hand. You couldn't really do one thing good without the other. Without the cash, how do you buy the inventory? But you need to also don't over purchase the inventory, then you run out of cash. So it's kind of this constant like influx, I guess, conflict of those two priorities that you need to make sure you can manage as a business owner, so your business can grow and really scale.
So Jason, you brought up, I guess you sparked my very large head with a very big and important point here. But what I forgot to mention, and to your point there about inventory management, and I'm about to get into that with your next question a little bit more. But at the end of the day, for Amazon sellers, and regardless of the business, we talked about it a little bit about the importance of human capital and people. But inventory is great and all, capital is great and all, but for a business to run effectively, you need to have certain infrastructure stood up in order to really drive acceleration, more revenue, more sales, more growth. And as I'm going to allude to with inventory management, you need to ensure that you have the right reimbursement partner. You need to ensure that you have the right PPC management software in place. You need to make sure that you have the right accountants to reconcile books. We know, again, with the amount of money going in and out, it's super important to be teaming up with the right accountants. Things like this is very important, and it all comes with a capital need. These businesses require capital as well for their services, but ensuring that you have this infrastructure in place can ensure further growth and sustainability.
Yeah, I think you kind of touch on the next question, which is like, what's the tip for the business out there to maintain a healthy cash flow? And for me, one of the tip I do is I have like it's not the best solution, but I have a spreadsheet, one of my many spreadsheet, to make sure I monitor the business cash flow on a weekly basis to see how much total we have and how much upcoming cash that's going to be going out and how much incoming projections cash that we'll be receiving in the business. Usually you want to do this kind of projections at least up to like 1 to hopefully 3 months out in the futures. Like, so if you see there's any potential point in your business where your cash flow could potentially go into negative, that's also when you might start looking into different options, maybe looking into like different funding solution like Payability have, or there's also other financial options that you can look into as a business owner. But having that kind of projections can help you kind of prevent that from happening in advance. Because the last thing you want to do is, okay, I need to place the inventory order for Q4. Then you do the calculation. I need 30,000 to put the deposit on, or maybe 10,000. Then you don't have enough cash in your bank account to pay for that deposit. Then you're kind of screwed. Then you're kind of in a very bad situation now. You don't have enough money to place that inventory that you needed for Q4 or for when the next season that's coming. So do you have any other tip that you want to share?
Yeah, and by the way, as far as inventory management, and that was my tip number one. So I'll go through with the next two tips. But as far as inventory management goes, I would highly recommend looking into SoStocked. Chelsea Cohen has built a great software that allows you to check and maintain your inventory, forecast it out appropriately, depending on seasons and time. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. And, Jason, feel free to tag them in this as well. But the other two tips that I would say to, again, maintain healthy cash flow, is always have at least 3 months of operating expenses saved up at any given point in time. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, Jason, life will happen. Your boat might say it's going to arrive with all of your, 3 containers of inventory, at X date, but for whatever reason, it might be human error, etc. It might not get to you for, additional couple of weeks. So that's why it's always important to provide this cushion. I typically would recommend 3 months. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have this cash crunch. The second thing that I would say is super important and they're out there, is ensuring, through Amazon, you're able to get paid upfront as much as possible. So there are services out there like Payability that can get you paid out every single day for Amazon sellers at reasonable prices. This way, you're able to continue reinvesting. You're not waiting. And then the additional one, the last one I'd say is, again, make sure you have the right accounting partner in place. You're dealing with a lot of cash going in and out, maintaining of invoices, making sure everything's up to date and accurate. So those would be my 3 or 4 additional tips to maintain healthy cash flow. Is again, make sure you have 3 months of operating expenses saved up. Make sure you have the right accounting partner in place to keep track of invoices and the flow of cash. The third thing, again, look into some of these solutions where it might be beneficial for you to have access to that capital daily. And then the fourth thing, definitely check out SoStock or any other inventory management platforms.
Yeah, we also use SoStock in our brand as
Okay.
well currently, so I'm pretty familiar. And actually, Chelsea was on our podcast before too. So yeah,
Really?
yes, yeah,
Well, then you all know Chelsea well, but happy to
yeah,
give her
yeah,
another shout out. And how's it
yeah.
going, Chelsea? But yeah, and by the way, for everybody out there that's interested in events and meeting other sellers in person, she is having a holiday party in Austin. So I'll work with Jason to ensure you get those details.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing that. I
Of
didn't know
course.
that. Okay. And the next question that we have for you is, do you have a recommendation on when is the right time to seek additional funding?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the end of the day, it depends what you're looking for. If you are looking to expand your business and roll out a new brand, a new product, probably makes sense to immediately go out and get a line of capital, or seek some sort of outside investment, or there are even instant advance solutions. Now, as far as when to have it, again, a lot of it comes down to forecasting. With quarter four, here you should already be well forecast into your January and February inventory. So, if you don't have capital on hand now to, go ahead and, look into purchasing that inventory, I'd say, that would be probably my recommendation on the inventory side, is always thinking, 3 to 4 months in advance. So it really is a repeating cycle. It also depends on, what these inventory levels are. If your inventory levels are, and their softwares like SoStock again and others to show this, if they're starting to run because you have these highly converting ads, you might want to slow down the ads, focus on restocking on the inventory. It all, again, depends on timing. But the beauty of, again, looking for continuous capital and daily capital solutions is that you're able to stay ahead of your inventory cycles, your buying cycles, because you, one, are taking the funds that you're making on a daily basis and searching for ways to continue growing.
Yeah, since you mentioned about the daily cash cycles, and I think that's most of the people that are selling on Amazon actually doesn't have that options. So this actually is a perfect segue to the next question. Is like, how do payability work, and what are the requirements for a seller that's looking into additional funding?
Yeah, so Payability offers 2 products. Our core product is our instant access solution. The way instant access works, we need to see at least $10,000 a month in sales over a 90-day period. So only $10,000 a month and 3 months of track record. For your customers, we'd be willing, and students, we'd be looking to make an exception at 60 days. But the way it works is we're able to see through our API. Again, we don't pull credit. So everything that we look at is account health, that you're selling a certain amount a month, which I mentioned, and your time in business. From this API, we're able to see actually at the sales that you're making on the gross ship level. So as these shipments are being made and marked as such, we're able to essentially advance you 80% of those daily sales to you to use immediately, instead of you having to wait the 14 or 20 days for Amazon to pay it out to you. So simply put, and our fees range anywhere from 0.3 to 2.5%. We don't pull credit. So, especially right now, my biggest advice is to, apply. It takes 2 to 3 minutes, see what we can get you, but also look at the other options that are out there, right? There are so many different funding providers out there. There's so many different ways of receiving funds. But we'll make available up to 80% of these daily sales for you every single day. And again, at the end of the 2-week period, that's when we'll collect our fee. So if you look at it on a daily basis, say you're doing $100 worth of sales every single day for 2 weeks at 1%, your fee would be $1, and we would be making 79 of those dollars every single day. Now, you don't need to take out the funds every single day. And, again, can use them on an as-needed basis. But we advise folks are deploying that capital as it comes in, if that's their strategy.
I see. And can you also share with us some of the story of the brand that actually grew their business significantly through some of the funding option that Payability provide?
Yeah, I'll tell you a great example, actually. And it kind of touches on what we were discussing earlier, which is one of the events that it sounds like we might be exhibiting with each other, next to each other. But we met a brand out in Las Vegas, a tortilla packer called Mr. Tortilla. You can look them up. Great branding. They came to us at the White Label Expo, and we were simply just explaining our services. And they said, wait a minute, we're doing about $200,000 a month in sales. We're about to roll out 5 or 6 new SKUs. And you're telling me all this while that Amazon has been holding that up in reserve for 2 weeks, which has slowed down our ability to invest in PPC strategies, sponsored ads on Amazon through Quartile. And you're telling me I could get that every single day, so I'm not falling behind on ad spend. And we said, yeah, we can. Here's how. We signed them up on the spot. We got them an offer that day. Within 90 days of being a Payability customer and the ability to have that access to capital daily to allocate towards the marketing channels that they were using and using effectively, they were able to grow their business in 90 days from about $227,000 a month to $440,000 a month.
Whoa, so that's a huge increase. Yeah.
It really shows, kind of back to what we were talking about, is it's important, to also have the right partners in place. What you do with this capital is the difference between it being very successful and it being something that's steady growth. What Mr. Tortilla did is they knew they had an ad strategy that could work. They just needed the consistent capital to do it. And with all of that in mind, that's how they were able to really scale and grow. So that's the most that's probably the best story that I have of it. And there are a lot of them, but it's the best because I got to meet these guys in person and see the growth.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Sounds like a very interesting story for sure. And this is really utilizing the cash flow. And of course, like you mentioned, you need to make sure you have a plan. You couldn't just borrow the money and just sit on it. Then, of course, the business is not going to grow.
Right.
So we are kind of at the final stretch of today's shows, and we also the final stretch of 2022. Is there any special audience for the people that's watching, maybe the replays that they can also look into with Payabilities?
Yeah. So typically speaking, when we fund clients through partners, we'll give them a $250 sign-on bonus, offsets, around a month's worth of fees typically. What we will do is we'll double that number through the end of the year, and we will be offering a $500 sign-on bonus for folks that do use Payability's funding in the form of instant access. That is something that we can definitely do. And Jason, you and I can revisit it to see if we can even bump up that figure going into 2023.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll post a link in the chat here. So for those of you that want to check out Payabilities, you can use our special dedicated sign up link to get that $500 sign up bonus. And we are also going to be putting together like a database of all the special offer that we have with all the different podcast guests and other service provider that we are talking to on the podcast. So it will be like an easy like a database of different resources, like for example, Soulstock could be one, and there's other companies that we're also negotiating right now to bring the best offer to the people that's part of the communities as well. But again, thank you so much for having being on as a guest on today's podcast. And I think your company have a lot of very interesting and very unique funding options that the seller should definitely look into if they're really looking to having different creative strategy to really grow the business, especially related to cash flow. So is there any other things you want to share before we end the interview today?
Yeah, I would just like to offer some words of encouragement to you all, out there. Jason's told me a lot about, the different range of sellers, that are his students, and, some of the things that you all are working on. I just, again, I think the biggest thing that I'll always suggest is creating optionality for yourself and for your business. And please, just continue to look at all of your options, whether it's an inventory management tool, whether it's a accounting tool, etc. And happy selling.
Okay, thank you so much, and hopefully we should have you back on the show again sometime next year as well. So, but
Absolutely.
thank you so much to be on our show, and it's an honor to have you. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate